So I did a number of TV and radio interviews, and really calling a lot of supporters back and thanking them. I spent a good part of the day on the phone congratulating the individual city council members. I've gotten through 4 of the 9, and still working through that list, but I will get to everybody today. But people have just been wonderful, and I did want to make it a point to just say thank you to the voters of Detroit who have trusted me with their vote, and they certainly have expectations that I'm going to go into City Hall and take on that bureaucracy and deliver services for the people that are a lot better than they're getting today. And that's what I intend to do, and I'm hoping that Governor Snyder and the emergency manager are going to facilitate my doing that at the earliest possible date.
Mayor Bing complained that there really was no collaboration between him and Kevin Moore, that he was largely being ignored, overlooked. Why would it work out any differently for you?
You know, I really don't want to criticize anybody in the past, but of course I've been talking to city council members and state legislators today who have said there wasn't collaboration with the mayor. So there's no reason to look back. We're just going to work forward.
So there's obviously quite a bit to do in the 7 hours, 48 hours. You'll be having this meeting with the 3 men.
There are actually 3 different meetings, but yeah.
Let's start with Kevin Moore. What do you expect to have in that meeting? Where will we start?
Well, you know, we haven't really seen each other since we were in law school. So, you know, 30 years ago, you know, I knew him well enough to say hi in the hallway, and he was the smart kid that sat in the front row and had all the answers. And when we graduated, he went to Miami, and I came to Detroit. I still haven't figured out how he ended up running Detroit before I did, but that's the way it's come out. But we're going to get reacquainted, and we need to build a relationship. And I'm optimistic we can do that.
How much of a latitude will the testimonies in federal court right now in bankruptcy, you know, from Andy Dillon and so forth, how much of an impact would that have in terms of the latitude you would request from Governor Snyder as you go in?
You know, I really see them as 2 completely different jobs, and they're both demanding full-time jobs. I mean, if you look at what's happening in federal court, what has to be done to handle the bankruptcy and to get through the determination of eligibility, but then it's going to be even more demanding as you get through the plan of adjustment. That's a huge and demanding undertaking. At the same time, somebody has to run the buses. Somebody has to get the garbage picked up. Somebody has to get the fire trucks fixed, which is another huge undertaking. And we're going to see if we can't come up with some division of responsibilities where we work together, and I hope we can, and we're going to see if that works out. But I don't know that the individual testimony much matters.
The national media has taken a strong interest in your win, and one of the narratives that is being making headlines nationally is one that you confronted head-on very early on, and that's race. How are you navigating that conversation? And you know, do you think that maybe again they're making a bigger deal of it than it should be?
Well, I mean, as you know, I resent it. I mean, I resent the whole white mayor term. I've resented it from the beginning, and people in this city got past it almost a year ago as people got to know me and we started to relate as individuals. But I got a phone call from Martin O'Malley, who was a mayor of Baltimore, who was Caucasian in a largely African-American city, and it was a very nice gesture on his part, and I got somebody I can talk to. But, you know, people in Detroit see me as a Detroiter who they think can make the quality of life better. People on the national scene are writing some superficial articles, and hopefully they'll get past this relatively soon.
Have you heard from Benny Napoleon at this time? And moving forward?
He called me last night and told me he was going to give a speech ahead of me, which he did.
And what will be the nature of your relationship if there is one moving forward?
You know, he and I have been friends for a long time, so I assume we will be again shortly.
Martin O'Malley was the mayor of Baltimore, later became mayor of Maryland. Should we read into his call to you as perhaps this could be another long road to the governorship in Michigan for you?
No. This is the last political office I will ever run for. If I wanted to be governor, there were a lot easier ways to get there than 250 house parties. My goal was to be mayor of Detroit, and it is the last political office I'll ever hold.
In your victory speech last night, you mentioned a lot of relationships that you want to build in the coming weeks. Can you talk a little bit more about how important this time is between now and January to get those relationships built?
You know, today's been wonderful. Republicans and Democrats in the legislature calling, the Detroit delegation calling, saying they want to have a different relationship with me. And, you know, at DMC for 9 years, we were under attack funding-wise from different elements all the time. And not only did the Detroit delegation unanimously stay with us on all those issues, but key Republican and Democratic leaders outstate stayed with us. And every time I would invite legislators from other part of the state, say, come down, I want you to see what's going on out here. I was always amazed how many would take a day, want to see for themselves. And when they saw, they became believers in what we were doing, and somebody would try to cut our funding, and some state rep in the western part of the state would stand up and say, you can't do that, that's wrong. We built those relationships over hours and hours of times, not when we had an issue in front of us. We built the relationships ahead of time. And I will be in Lansing starting next week and see if I can extend those relationships to the city of Detroit. But this business, everything's about relationships. It's how you treat people. It's can they trust you. And, you know, we have Republicans and Democrats, and we believe different things, and nobody's saying you check your party principles. But just because you're in different parties doesn't mean there aren't interests of common good, and I'm going to work on building those relationships across the lines.
Some of them are opposing relationships, though. I mean, some of the, you mentioned ministers and clergy, and some people in those groups have directly opposed the emergency manager. You said you would sit down and build a relationship with. How do you plan to navigate those two sides and build relationships on both sides of that? And do you feel like your agenda, which is a very aggressive agenda, hinges on how well you navigate that?
Yeah, I don't think you really have an understanding of the dynamics. Numerous of those ministers who oppose the emergency manager have also sat in meetings with Andy Dillon offering advice. Just because you're against the emergency manager doesn't mean you don't talk to them. And I think the great majority of leaders in this town understand that. Those aren't necessarily conflicting positions.
Would you talk about your meeting that would be coming up with Governor Snyder? You said
We're going to.
that you're a turnaround guy. You would say, if I'm in office, you don't need an emergency manager. What's the timetable you envision asking him to?
I have a feeling the meeting will go better if I say it to him before I say it to you.
Mike, a lot of expectations on you, obviously. One in particular, I've heard, certainly online and other places too, is that people hope that the city of Detroit gets to keep the water department. Just wondering, how do you plan to fight that?
You know, we're going to take these issues one at a time. I do believe, as I've said over and over, the city should have the water department. Then you see numbers thrown out like $9 billion for sale. Well, $9 billion is, to me, be an amazing number, and I don't believe it's realistic. But you're going to have to look at these things, and we need to recognize the reality that as long as Kevin Orr is here, the emergency manager is ultimately going to make those decisions. And so will I expect to have input, and will I make arguments? Absolutely. What exactly that role is, we're going to have to work out. But the relationship is going to be professional, and it's going to be respectful.
Mike, along those same lines, Judge Rhodes in bankruptcy court today ruled that he rejected the challenge by the NAACP
Right.
Regarding the legality of Michigan's emergency manager law. And in that ruling, he said that only Kevin Orr has the authority to act on the city's behalf in bankruptcy court. How does that play into your campaign pledges to file your own plan of adjustment, particularly if they go after pensions?
It's exactly the ruling that I expected. That's what the state law says. The state law says that Kevin Orr is, the emergency manager, is the representative of the city under the law. By ruling that Kevin Orr is the representative of the city doesn't mean he's the only party that can submit a plan. And so, but the ruling today is what I would have expected.
How would it work if you were to?
You know, I'm not, right now I'm focusing on a positive cooperative thing, not on the conflict. And so I really don't want to go into areas because I really am approaching this with an optimistic view that I'm going to have a cooperative relationship.
You've talked at length about bringing in a strong management
once I know from the governor and the emergency manager whether I will be authorized to actually extend job offers. So it doesn't do me any good to call them right now, and we're going to see how that plays out. So right now, okay. So right now, what we're doing is I'm just going to sit down in a positive way and see if we can't work out a partnership. And once the terms of that partnership are worked out, a lot of the excellent questions you're asking here, we'll be able to answer.
The Detroit delegation plays obviously an important role here in terms of representing the city in Lansing. Talk about your expectations and how those, in fact, your election somehow perhaps change the perception of Detroit and Lansing.
Well, you know, I think the fights between the mayor and the Detroit delegation did the city enormous damage in Lansing. And I was always amazed because every fight DMC had, the Detroit delegation was fighting in a unified fashion on our side. But it is going to be very hard to get the respect of the outstate legislators if the mayor and the Detroit legislators are not aligned. And I've talked to a number of Detroit legislators today who feel exactly the same way, and I'm confident we'll build the same kind of partnerships I had with them at DMC.
We talked a little about city council, but you know we've got this whole new makeup of city council, a lot of young people, a lot of new, fresh faces. Do you feel like you'll be able to really, when you look at who's, and clearly you don't know much about people who are newly elected, but are you anticipating that you'll really be able to build a really strong relationship with them and get things done together?
You know, I like what I've seen. You know, I run into the council people on the campaign trail. We're in the same city. Some of them I've known for years. You know, George Cushingberry and I've been friends for 25 years. Others I've known more recently. Scott Benson certainly been very impressive in the things that he's done in this community. Gabe Leland I've worked with for years. So it's not like these individuals are new to me, but I think there is a sincere commitment to the city of Detroit. I think some of the love of fighting for fighting's sake that may have gone on in the past, I don't see coming out of this council. And I'm not saying we're not going to disagree. Mayors and councils disagree all the time. But I think you're going to find us handle it in a much more adult manner than has been handled in the past.
So a lot of business leaders in the community have also said it's imperative if you get elected that you have to work with Windsor to create a joint economic zone in terms of beefing up Detroit. How do you plan on working?
Yeah, I'm going to put an economic development team in place, and I'm going to rely on the experts to do that. But I know the mayor well. DMC had a number of business dealings over in Windsor. We actually had contracts for Canadians who couldn't get care in Windsor, and Eddie Francis and I spent a lot of time on those issues. I got a good relationship there, and I'm sure we're going to do just fine. All right. All right. Thank you all very much. And hopefully we'll get together in a week, and I'll have answers for a lot of these questions.